Welcome to the tutorial on the new science of learning. This was actually developed by Professor Terry Doyle from Ferris State University. I had the privilege of attending one of his lectures at the University of Delaware, a seminar on how the brain operates as an organ to help maximize your learning potential. And I thought this would be helpful for my students during the first week of class. So I want to share with you some of the things that he taught to us as faculty members. The first thing you need to know about your brain is that it was meant to explore and learn. You were born to learn. So as frustrating as school can be sometimes, and as boring as it can be sometimes, know that you're doing what your brain was meant to do. Basically, one of the basic axioms of the brain is that it's like a muscle, in the sense of if you don't use it, you lose it. And sadly, a lot of us, once we get our degree or our diploma or the job that we were vying for or what have you, we stop learning. We decide that we, have pretty much achieved what we set out to achieve, and we stop learning. And when you do that, the brain stops responding to the point where it can actually atrophy, much like a muscle. So although the brain is an organ and not a muscle, it does function in a similar way, in that the more you use it, the more it will grow, and if you don't use it, it will actually shrink. Now, we've known about this for a long time, but now we have the actual visual scientific evidence to back it up. And basically, functional MRIs have changed everything. So we know now that learning is a change in the neural patterns of the brain. And we can see this change, and we've known for a long time that learning is a change in neural patterns, but now we have the pictures from functional MRIs to show us the tissue, the actual tissue growth of the brain after we learn something new. So I want to show you a before and after picture. Let me see here. This right here is a dendrite before this test study learned something new, and in this case it was a new language. And this was a study done by Janet Zadina in 2010. And this person was embarking on learning a new language. And you could see that in the language centers of the brain, this is a typical neuron up here. And then this is the area that we're looking at magnified. So this is a dendrite. And dendrites are parts of neurons or brain cells that actually extend out and try to make connections with other neurons or brain cells. So a neuron by itself isn't very smart. If you have one neuron, it really doesn't do a whole lot. What you want are many connections so the neurons can talk to each other. And when you get a lot of neurons in a small space connecting and talking to each other, that's when you get brainstorms. That's when you get real creative thought. So we can see that process happening here. This is before the test subject starts learning the language, and this is their dendrite. And you can see that over the course of the semester, as the subject was learning the language, you can see the real growth. This is tissue growth here. This is a dendrite actually reaching out and growing to make connections with other neurons to essentially tell the other neurons what it has learned. So this is really pretty fascinating stuff, and it's basically just reinforcing or providing evidence for something that we've known for a long time anyway, and that's when we learn something new, our brain actually grows. We actually form brain tissue, and this process is known as long-term potentiation. Now, on the flip side of that coin, when we stop learning something new, we get brain atrophy. So here again, you can see here's a dendrite, and we stopped practicing our language. So we started to learn a new language, and then after the semester, we just stopped using it. And we can see now this dendrite is actually getting reabsorbed. So that new tissue that we were able to grow during that 16 weeks, when we stopped using it, that tissue gets reabsorbed. And so basically, you will forget what you have learned. Now, one way to keep this from happening is to keep practicing what you have learned. Never stop learning. So in other words, for every class, and not just my class, but any class you take, after that day's lecture, before you go to bed, you want to review your lecture notes. And you only need to take 10 minutes or so. You don't have to invest an hour or more. Really, just 10 minutes of brief review will help convince Mother Nature that you need this brain tissue. And if you do that every night, you review what you've learned that day, and then go back to the previous notes and spend a couple minutes. You will reinforce that material every single day and keep convincing Mother Nature that it's worth the energy she has expended in building that new brain tissue. If you don't do that, eventually the brain tissue will likely go away. So at the end of the day, the brain operates from the principle, if you don't use it, you lose it. And you have to remember that it is he who does the work who does the learning. So if you want to learn, you really have to roll up your sleeves, and you have to be willing to review the material and make the material meaningful for you. So that's the first segment of my lecture in the Neuroscience of Learning, and please join me for my next segment where we talk about the 5 things the brain needs to function effectively.